So, do you want to hear a great story? You sure? I don't hear you. All right, well, I'll give you a couple of seconds to think about it. Well, I'm a little under the weather today. Woke up with everything feeling like garbage, but I thought I'd do this because has been on my mind. Julian Lennon is a very, very talented individual. I always thought that he got a raw deal. I think because he's John Lennon's son, there's a burden, that is unique to him. I think that there's walls up. I don't know if Yoko put any of them up. She's a very powerful woman. But for some reason, he's dismissed because maybe trying to replace your father. How dare you? You know, there's occasions when he's been canceled. He came out with an album, Jude, which it took about 30 years to do. Hey, God Thunder Gaming. And some old songs and new songs that Lennon wanted to balance the sound. And it was at a time when he was embracing. He had gone through a lot of changes, and he had decided to finally call himself Julian. He'd been John Charles Julian Lennon his whole life. Julian Lennon. And everyone knew him as Julian. Even John and Cynthia called him Julian. But he wanted to be him finally, probably getting away from his father's legacy, right? So he said, okay, I'm going to be Julian. And the album's going to be called Jude. You know the story between Jude. Paul McCartney was visiting his mom when they were going through the breakup, John and the mom. And he started, hey, Jude, don't make it bad, take a sense. And ended up making it Julian. It was a mouthful, Jude. So Julian, hey, Jude was written about Julian. So what Jude meant to him for all these years, and he wanted to embrace it to other people and to him. So what happened was the album was a big hit for himself. Calling it Jude is, releasing a lot of demons for years, right? He's finally understanding who he is. But the funny thing was that he puts the whole band together, right? He wanted to really go on tour, go on the shows, the TV shows, the ones that he used to watch and the ones that he always wanted to appear on. Jules Holland's big song, Jules Holland, former keyboardist of Squeeze, later with Jules Holland. It's a live music show in the BBC in England, and it's been great for like more than 30 years. There's Graham Norton, a BBC show, which is great. And Julian, at that point, had done his radio shows, Graham Norton, and they all went well. But he said, yeah, I'd like to get on the real show, and the producers turned him down. He didn't understand why, because everything went well on the radio and a lot of the late night shows in New York. They just weren't interested in him. He didn't understand why, but yet he did. He did the name change. He had been away for 10 years. He called the album Jude. Maybe is he trying to capitalize on that name? I don't know. But I would at least want to ask about it. If you're a late night host, it is Julian Lennon, right? Yeah, Beatles. So he was turned down. And it hurt him. It hurt him because he feels just when he wants to open up. Yeah, right, God. He wants to answer any question now. He doesn't want to close off anymore. And now he wants to be him and purge everything. No one wants to hear it. Not being able to speak his piece, whatever his piece is. No one knows what it is because he's changed a bit, right? He's in his 60s now. Oh, me? 7 years of age. And he doesn't understand the son of a great man, maybe, there's a weird dismissal, I think, in America. Like, oh, you're dismissed. Like, you're fucked if you're the son of a great man. Like, right, how are you ever going to live up? And that happens. And when you try to, oh, really? I'm 64. So, how dare the son try to be better than the father, any shape, way, or form, or be as good as, say, more than him, right? You're dismissed. And that's why Julian Lennon became a photographer. And that's his first love, photography. Maybe because he wasn't doing it in music. He wasn't able to really forge through. And in 84, he had a number one hit. Not in America, Sweden and other places. But behind the camera, he's very comfortable. Traveling, he has a foundation. And the White Feather. And they help people all over the world. And it started in with indigenous cultures. Don't know, God's thunder. So Julian Lennon was on tour with his band, and outside of America, his song was number one, "Saltwater," top 10 all over the world. "Saltwater," which was about the environment. I like it, God. So it's about humanitarian issues. The song "Saltwater." And he was doing all kinds of shows. He was doing TV across the country at that time. And he was in Adelaide. And he got a call from the hotel management. He was up in his room saying, "Excuse me, Mr. Lennon, there's an Aboriginal tribe down here with a TV crew and like 30, 40 people. Would you like to say hi? They want to say hello to you." And he thought it was a prank. He goes, "Yeah, right. What the hell would they want to come see him for?" They called back like 5 minutes later. "No, this is serious. Can you come down and listen to what they have to say?" He got ready. It's a TV crew. He doesn't know what's going on. He gets himself all dressed up, goes downstairs. He sees a podium, right? And 30 or 40 people, platform, 30 people, 40 people around it. And they're indigenous TV crews, bunch of other people, hotel people looking on. He has no idea what this is about. He knows it's not about his dad. So the elder of the tribe, called the Moaning people, walk up to him, the older woman, and presented him with a male swan's white feather, which is like a foot big, and said, "Can you help us? You have a voice. Can you help us?" Because remember, he was being heard around the countries at that time. And he said he didn't know what to do. Should I be this rock and roll star? Or do I step up to the plate and be a human being? Whatever it means, he'll figure it out. So he says, "I can help the children," because he knew he couldn't get anything done now. And he wasn't sure what their problems were. He imagined it was the same as most indigenous people, tribes around the world, right? They have all issues. He's well read. And she said, "Can you help us?" And he said, "Well, I'll do it for the children." And she smiled. The next generation. So he takes this feather. Her name was Irish. She was the eldest, and she passed away a few years ago. So he takes this, and he's just watching it. So for 10 years, he makes a documentary about this with friends, Whale Dreamers. And it was independent. They had no money, a little money. He had some money, no sponsorship really. They won 8 or 9 International Independent Film Awards, which is amazing. People saw it. But the backstory to it was that his father told him when he was about 16, or 16 or 15, one of the last times he was together, he said, "If anything ever happens to me, I'll let you know that I'm okay, and we're okay. We're all gonna be okay, whatever mom did. It'll be in the form of a white feather, and that is, now, when they took the beetle picture for the anthology, there was a white swan that got into the picture when George, Paul, and Ringo took the picture for the in '95. There was a white swan that just flew there. I'll see if I can pull it up for you. Yes, I do play the guitar and drums. Let me see if I can find it here. Because it's very interesting. And when you are a Beatles son, it must be brutal. Even for him with the money, it was brutal. He had to fight Yoko for years. I believe he got a $50 million settlement not to write a tell-all book about her. Yeah, I don't see it here, but the anthology just came out. The four, it was okay. What do you think about Civ and Wolfie B? Have no idea what that is. Do I think Justin Bieber? Oh, I don't think you're a troll, but I don't feel great today, so troll me tomorrow. Okay. Yoko with Cynthia. Cynthia got screwed over. You know what the funny thing is? God's done the gaming. I'll tell you what it is. And if you are 18, it seems like George Harrison. I don't know how much you know about the Beatles. George Harrison went to learn to meditate with the Maharishi and seemed to get more angry and bitter after he learned it. Became more of a bastard. John Lennon said he used to hit his wife. He was a hitter. He couldn't express himself. He smacked Cynthia. Now, she said that he pushed her hard, didn't smack her, pushed her hard once, was very apologetic, and never did it again. I kind of believe that. May Pang alluded to the fact that he got a little physical, and that's 1973. So that's like 8 years after he said he'd never do it again. He had beat up a DJ at Paul McCartney's 21st birthday who alluded that he went with Brian Epstein while his wife gave birth. John Lennon wasn't there for the first week. John went on holiday with Brian Epstein to Spain, I believe. And many people, Brian liked John and thought it was kind of like, an illicit kind of relationship. And many people think that no, John was just going and teasing him to show him, like, you talk to me, I'm the leader of the band. John cemented his footing as you come to talk to me when you talk about the Beatles. Now, I'll tell you something very interesting. Oh, well, I figured you were trolling at first. I'm glad you're locked in. You're too young to troll. You're 18. What do you have to be upset about unless you're not really 18? No, that's cool. That's cool. Honestly, I've trolled too, but I'm 64. I've trolled. Not in a long time. You know what? I stopped trolling when I got a station, a small kind of YouTube channel. I'm glad you're locked in though. But yeah, and so Bob Woolard, I think, was the DJ. And at Paul's 21st birthday, John was drunk, which John was a big drinker, and asked him about rumors if he were gay, and he beat the shit out of him. He was a hitter. Well, I became a Beatle fan when I was 7, which is 100 years from your life, 1968. I lived on this block in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn. And back then, the houses had these you walked in the gate, right to the right, there were these 2 metal doors, like trap door. You ever go to a store and you see, like, the delivery, how you get into the basement, there's 2 metal doors and they fold down? Well, people kept them up, and if you walk down, they had a table down there, a kitchen. People slept and had holidays upstairs, but their basement they used, like, to live in. Well, I used to go and always bother this guy, Dan DeCherico, and his wife, Ann, who were about 12 years older than my parents, but my parents were friends with them. Their daughter, Mary Ann, was 16. Yeah, I was like 7, used to babysit me. I used to go down there all the time. She gave me this 45 if I saw her standing there. And I was hooked. Wore that thing out. My mother went and bought me the Magical Mystery Tour album in 68, went and bought me Hey Jude in 68. I remember going to like 8 o'clock at night. She drove to Corvettes, was a store back then. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. Department store. Had a record department. It was like 79 cents back then, 69 cents. And got that. I was hooked. And then they broke up. I probably jinxed them. But yeah, Lennon, I will tell you something. God, Thunder Gaming. So I was looking for some religion today. So you see, you're not trolling. You helped me. I'll tell you this much. I know someone, an actor, and I know for a fact, like he's close to Elton John. I've seen pictures of them at Elton John's 65th birthday, like 20 years ago, whatever it was. He told me that John Lennon had an affair with Elton. It wasn't a long affair. It was intense. And I get the feeling Elton was doing more to John Lennon than John was doing to him, if you know what I mean. And then there's always been stuff alluded. Yeah, that's what, and I believe this guy. You know, Yoko said once that John, you know what, Thunder, I don't think he was bi. I think you really had to. Well, Yoko kind of said if someone interested him that much mentally, he could be that way. I don't know what that meant. I'm thinking that you really had to turn him on mentally. Like he was into connection. I don't think it had anything to do with physicalness or whatever. But there's no reason that this guy would lie to me with a story like that. And I could buy it. You know, you got to remember, John was stoned out of his head most of the time. John was drunk as hell in 73 when he was out in LA. They were always drinking, coking, booze. You know, could something have happened? I wasn't there. But would I bet my life no? No, I wouldn't. Because generally speaking, if you ever notice, Thunder, the Star magazine, the Inquirer, I don't know where you're from, but if you know of all those magazines, when a rumor comes out that you're gay, you usually are. They say anything about you. You're a prick, you're a douchebag, you hit women. All that stuff could be, you know, bullshit. When they say you're gay, it's true. They said for years Kevin Spacey was. Finally, 25 years later, he was. They said Rock Hudson was. 25 years later, it came out. That stuff, when it comes out, is usually true. Think about it. Your biggest enemy, right? High school, you're 18 if you really are 18. You could hate people, right? You're never going to say they're gay, though. You'll say they're a douchebag, they lie, they cheat, they steal. You're not going to call them gay. You know, you're gay. You know, not like you're gay, like stupid. Like he's gay, which there's nothing wrong with it if you're gay. That's your choice. But you know what I mean? McCartney is he's very well. British people are very effeminate. I was a stockbroker. I worked in England for a year and a half in 1990, 91, before you were born. Um, very effeminate. Uh, but John Lennon, don't know. Look, David Bowie, Mick Jagger, a lot of those 1960s artists, they experimented. Right, right. Absolutely. That's what I meant, Thunder. Thank you. Yeah, you're like, ah, that's gay. You're gay. You're like, ah, you're an asshole. Get away from me. Yeah, I agree with you. If they're saying you're gay, it's probably true. British, yeah. Well, we loved Thunder in America in the 60s. I don't know if you're into James Bond. That was very big in the 60s. The culture of the 60s really hit America. In the 60s, we loved everything British. Lulu, the Beatles, the Stones, right? Everything from Britain, we loved. It was like the coolest thing, Britain. They had the greatest actors, they had this, they had that. And we really, hey Joe, and we really grabbed on to the Brits. They had a very big say in who we were as Americans. And then it died in the early 70s. You got to remember from like 73 on, the Stones weren't big. The Stones got big again in 78, 79. For 5 years, the Stones did nothing. Absolutely. Thunder. Yeah, yeah. American men were more the rolled up sleeves, cigarettes, fixing a motorcycle. Absolutely right. You see, you know your stuff. Yeah, British men were they weren't hugging each other. Hey, bro hugs. That didn't start there. I guarantee you that did not start in England. The bro hugs. Uh, they were kind of like you kept your distance. I always believe that as more. Well, look, Americans. It was less segregated in England. England was always a bit socialist. In America, when we had segregation, that's why Jimi Hendrix was in England, Paul Simon was in England. Why do you think all the American acts were in England? What would they be doing in England? It wasn't easy to travel there. It's not like today you could just get on a plane in 5 hours, you're there. Right? Why? Because there wasn't segregation. Back in 65 or 64, when the Beatles were going to play Jacksonville in Florida, the Beatles almost canceled the concert because they were used to segregation. And the Beatles said, no, 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 we don't segregate. That's because they didn't in England. In England, it was much more accepted. African Americans, whites, whatever. They were all together. And that's why guys like Hendrix and Paul Simon, they found it easier to be there. Well, current day England, when I worked there was getting Pakistani in 91. Now, forget about it. There's a Pakistani mayor now, which there's nothing wrong with it. Don't get me wrong. I'm not prejudiced. I'm just saying, if you're England, shouldn't you have more English people in there than Pakistanis? You're England. That's what I mean. English. You always thought of the Queen, and as nonsense as that is, but you always believed in Parliament and the Queen, and everything was uppity up and all that bullshit. Not that I agree with it, but you don't think you're going to walk into an English tavern and see 19 Pakistanis having tea. You know what I mean? Could be karma. Yeah, current day England is not England anymore. I probably wouldn't recognize it. Now in England, if you fight, protest in the street and you're an English citizen, they'll arrest you. Yeah, well, you know what happens? Uh, Listen, I think people should be able to, you can never blame someone for wanting a better life for their kid. If you have to go somewhere else and you feel you have to go in the illegitimate way because you can't get in the right way, listen, you can't blame parents for being parents wanting it. Well, I'll tell you one thing about John Lennon. John Lennon was Marxist. John Lennon loved Marx. He quoted Karl Marx a lot in the early 60s. John Lennon, look at the song Imagine. No borders. No, John Lennon was talking about that in 1971. Imagine no borders, globalization. Everyone lived, you didn't have borders, you could do whatever you wanted. John Lennon agreed with that, but John Lennon also was very fickle. He was woke in the 70s, I agree, but I'll tell you one thing about him. He in 1971 gave $50,000 to buy, vests for the police. So, Lennon respected police, but I think also you gotta remember John and, the Beatles, if it weren't for police protecting them during Beatlemania, they would have got mauled. You gotta remember, John probably respected police a lot because, it was crazy if there weren't police there. So he probably respected the police for that. Um, but absolutely, he'd be very LGBT. Absolutely, he'd be pro. I don't know if he'd be marching with, but I think he'd be pro that. I think John felt that live and let live. You got to remember, they grew up in England. England was very socialist. When he came to New York, I think that's why he got into all the radicalization, because I think he wanted to bring a little of England here. And he hung out with Abbie Hoffman. I don't know if you've heard of Abbie Hoffman and Timothy Leary, all the radical left wingers. Lennon hung out with them because he wanted to bring that message of England here. I agree, Thunder. That's a great point, man. You're a smart dude. Yeah. Look, I don't agree with. It depends what you say woke is. You know, uh, should people get okay? Should people get mad at me because I don't call them a bread box because that's what they want to be called? Well, if I don't feel comfortable saying, "Hey, bread box," because that's not what I learned for 50 years in school, you know, roll with me. But I'm not wrong because I don't adhere to your beliefs. You know, that's like me walking into someone's a temple and saying, "No, you're doing it all wrong. We don't do that in the Catholic Church." I wouldn't do that. I just wouldn't say anything. But if I walk into the synagogue, you shouldn't say, "Oh, you're Catholic. They do it all wrong. Come here." Right? Uh, listen, I'm a firm believer you can't choose who you love. I'm a believer half-ass with that. But, you could stay away from who you think is not good for you. You don't have to continue to see someone who beats the shit out of you if you're a woman. I don't care how much you love them. After a while, the next time you go there and you get hit, it's not your fault, but it's kind of like me walking through the worst neighborhood in the Bronx, right? Counting $100 bills and someone hits me over the head with a bat and I end up in the hospital. I guarantee you, if Joe Coltrane comes and visits me, he's going to say, "Oh man, you okay?" He's going to say, "Vin, not for anything. What the fuck are you doing? You know the way it is there." Well, that's the thing. There comes time when you have to own some responsibility for what you're doing. And if you are pushing ideas that aren't mainstream, you're going to get pushback. And you can't say, like, "Oh my God, how could you push back at me?" Where have you been living for the last 60 years? I think a lot of ideas are good that are liberal. I do. I'm not liberal, but I was a musician. Uh, there has to be a little bit of liberalness in me. I always felt that actors and actresses, the reason why they are so liberal, so woke, so to speak, is because they just are convinced they know everything. Brad Pitt has played like a homeless guy, an Indian. I'm just metaphorically played all these characters, so he thinks because they do research for their role, like I know what it's like to be that. Like just because Robert De Niro went during the movie Awakenings and stayed in uh, a psychiatric ward for 4 weeks and visited it and hung out in there, doesn't mean he knows what it's like to live there for years. He has an idea, but he also knows that he can say, "Okay, I'm enough, open up and let me out." They can't do that. So how could Robert De Niro say, beyond a reasonable doubt, "Oh, I know what it's like"? No, you don't. Because when you go like this, they open the door and let you out. The inmate can't do this. And that's what happens. We all think we understand. You go to a wake, someone's, God forbid, son dies of cancer. You have a son. Oh my God, I know how you feel. No, you don't. How could you know? What, did your son just die? You don't know. We say things that are canned responses because we feel that's what people want to hear. We feel that's what we're supposed to do as human beings. Does it make it right? We have the best intentions. Hey, Thunder, we have the best intentions, right? I don't think most of us go out and try to break everybody's balls, except for Thunder when he first came in here. See, now Thunder's my pal. You see? But yeah, John was woken to say, yeah. Well, I think they all were. I think George was too. Look, George loved Hinduism and loved all that. So yeah, I just think musicians in general, and I don't know if you were listening while you left for a couple of minutes. Are you Hindu? Oh, okay, man. That's cool. I have an email. I don't have I am actually am on I think I'm on, what do they call it? X? I never use it. Hit me up at my email. Lovethehits@gmail.com. I'd love to talk to you. I'll put it up here. Leave it to me. I had a Hindu troll. Boy, am I really coming up in this world, aren't I? I have Hindu friends. You know what I did? That's my email. So just hit me up. I'd love to talk to you. Absolutely. I love talking to people that are younger than me because I have to tell you, when I first started my channel, Thunder, I didn't know what doxing was. I had to ask someone, you know what it is, doxing? He said, boxing? I said, no, doxing. I found out. Hey, Zach, you're 34? I wish I was 34. The next time I'm going to see that's with a one in front of it. Good for you. That's a great age. At 34, I was married and I was about to have my first kid, my only kid. I have a 30-year-old son, almost your age. The world has changed, though, Zach. It really has. I see it, and I'm not outing it like you are. You know, I'm not dealing with people your age. I have a couple of friends' sons that are your age, but I'm not hanging out. Hey, you want to go partying tonight? They the fuck out of here. You're an old man. You're not going to do that. And I don't actually present old. Like I can go into a place. Yes, George Harrison had a black eye. Yes, because at the cavern when George Harrison, well, you mean a black eye under his eye? I don't know about the eye color, but under his eye, when Ringo Starr took over for Pete Best, they were screaming, Ringo never, Pete forever. A lot of people were mad that the Beatles fired Pete Best, and he got headbutted protecting Ringo. So he did have a black eye in the cavern when he was like 21 years of age under his eye. As for a black guy, I'm not sure. But I'll tell you, this world has changed. Now, to be honest with you guys, and I'm honest, I'm a Republican. But honestly, if I was in college and I could vote for someone who was willing to forgive my debt, you bet your ass I'd vote for him. So I'm being honest. I think it's much easier to be a Democrat today because you're taught it a bit more in school. They didn't do that when I was a kid. And you know, you come out of school, you spent 150,000 to go to school, and you can't afford to live in Manhattan. God forbid you want a Starbucks at $7. I don't blame young people for coming out saying, "I'll never have what my parents had. I'll never have a house. I'll never have a." I don't blame them. I don't. Sure, I do. Yeah, Charlie. What I met him. I met Charlie at one of his symposiums about 2 years ago in Brooklyn. I spoke to. I don't know if John did. I spoke to him. He seemed very nice. Charlie did incite the left. I'm not going to lie. He did. Uh, I don't. I believe he believed in his faith. I don't think Charlie Kirk was pretending to be who he was. I think he was. It did rub a lot of people the wrong way. When you're telling people, "Oh, if you're gay, you're going to go to hell," and you have a gay child or you're gay, I could see you being angry. I can't see you walking around like this after he got shot, like making fun he got shot in the neck. But um, I can understand that, when yeah, I saw that original film. A friend of mine was in law enforcement and sent me the actual film from 5 feet away. And I don't know if you know it, but one of his team got caught taking pictures of him while he was on the floor. Yeah, he was radical right. He was. When you talk like that, no one deserves that. Don't get me wrong. Look, I can't stand certain people, but I would never root for them to get hurt. Never. Um, yeah, I don't know much about what his wife's been doing. I know that on his end, they're trying to make her to be like another Jackie Kennedy, Jackie Onassis, like a hero for the people. I really haven't read much, Thunder. I haven't. Listen, it was a tragedy what happened to him. No one deserves that. Um, I don't care if you're on the left, you're right, whatever. But that just shows you that our country is. I don't mean radical left. I mean radical now. Like if you don't like what someone says now, you'll go after them. You won't. You won't even say, "Ah, fuck them." You'll shoot at them, and it's a terrible, terrible thing. It really is because we're supposed to be better than that, America. Right. Well, everyone's supposed to be better than that. But yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna have to check that out. Thunder. I don't know if his wife's been acting shady. Thank you for the point. I don't know. That assassination video scared. Yeah, because he was just about to answer a question, thinking, "Oh, I'll be off soon. I'll see my kid." Yeah, that's scary. Zach's not the funny thing. And I took a tour to Dakota in 1984. I was dating this girl about 2 months, and I called my friend. She was hanging with her friend. Come hang with us. We went to the Dakota, and we're up against the gate. Dead winter, freezing our balls off. The guard comes out, a young guy in a uniform. Could I help you? Gramps, you're right. Oh, you have a great, great. Well, hit the notification. I'll probably be. Oh, tonight I'm doing a show. Definitely, I'd love you to come in, Thunder. And yes, I am your anointed Gramps. How's that? Thank you for coming in, and have a nice time today with your girlfriend. Enjoy your youth, because believe it, one day when you're 64, you're gonna say, "Shit, I remember this old bastard that I happened to go on." There was a thing called YouTube back then, and this old idiot who's probably been dead 30 years. No, no, I don't. I had one. I had one. She smartened up. Oh, is she, Joe? Really? I have a friend who's a Mason. I never asked much about it, but have a great day today. And if you can come in tonight, come in, say hi. Have a great day, and I hope you had a great Thanksgiving, Thunder. Um, Gramps, God, that just that just knocked the shit out of me. No one's ever called me that. But thank you for coming in. Have a good time today. Yeah, well, so I went to the guy said, "Can I help you?" I said, "I'm just showing my girl where Lennon got killed." Blah 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 blah. He said, "Oh my, I actually said, okay, Frank, thanks." I actually said to the guy, "Is there any way to go eat here or something?" It's like 10:30 or something. He said, "Well, uh, Amsterdam Avenue, which is a block down." He said, "I didn't even eat." He wasn't hinting, but he said, I have a double shift. The guy didn't come in, so I'm going to be here now till 6 in the morning." I said, "You want us to bring you something?" Well, I think we brought him something. Thank you, Joe. We brought him a tea. I forget. It's been 100 years ago. He opens the gate, brings us in. We go to the right, about 40 feet. You walk in, you go to the right. That's Lennon's building. Now, if you just look straight to the left, there's a big fountain. To the left, that was where they filmed Rosemary's Baby. To the right was where Lauren Bacall lived. There's like it's like a V, a building, and then there's the building on the right when you walk right through the gate. And that courtyard was built for carriage horses back in the day. So yes, you are, Thunder. God bless you, man. So he takes us, he opens up Studio One. Studio One was where Lennon and Yoko used to do all her business. He opens the door. He doesn't put the light on, but he doesn't put the light on in the office, but the light's on from the hallway. And we look in, and there's two desks, all file cabinets. One was Lennon's desk. There was a guitar leaning up against I forget what it was, a chair, whatever. And a desk with all mounted papers. And he said that was Yoko. She does business here. So he told us stories. He told us, oh yeah, Rex Reed would go to Central Park, pick up young boys, hustlers, and bring them back to his apartment. Rex Reed lived there. Lauren Bacall, he said, was a bitch. He said Lauren Bacall would go to Gristedes and would have an order sent, wanted it packed a certain way, and if one can was in the wrong bag, she'd send it all back to be repacked. Little nutty. Carol O'Connor and Tony Randall lived across the street at 2 Central Park West, I think, or 1, whatever it was. But so what happened was 4 years ago, my friend Mitch, who comes in here, never went to the Dakota, big Beatle fan like me, so I brought him. I'm at the gate, and a guy walks out just like the first time 40 years ago. "Can I help you?" I said, "No, I'm just showing my friend, big Beatle fan, blah, 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 blah. Does Yoko still live here?" And he said, "Well, she has the apartment, but they own 7 apartments, but she's not here anymore. She lives upstate," he told us. Yoko's upstate somewhere. I saw the filing cabinets. I didn't see the rolling ladder. But yeah, if you looked in that office, there was a piano covered on the left. If you look straight back about 25 feet, it was a big room. There was 2 desks, one desk, then like 10 feet over, one desk. Behind it almost went to the whole wall, the filing cabinets. I didn't see the rolling ladder. Maybe it was all the way at the end. But so this guy, I told him, I said, I came here 40 years ago, and this guy, Angel, gave me Angel. Oh, he's a legend here. And I told him that, oh, yeah, he showed us around. He goes, oh, Angel had so many stories. I said, is he still here? He goes, no, he retired a few years ago. He's in Florida. Angel was a couple of years younger than me because I was back then 23, he must have been 21 or so. But he told us about this new guy, told us the story. The guy that was on the night that Lennon got killed, his name was Jose. Oh, I've been on shows. I went to a Beatles fest, believe it or not, Thunder, and they offered me a job on the panel. I was stumping them. No one knew why Paul McCartney had a beard during Let It Be. And I knew. Yeah, well, Thunder, yeah, Yoko was a bit of a promotional. She was all about herself. So I will, and if you want to know the reason McCartney had the beard, right after in October or whatever it was when they did on the David Frost show, Hey Jude, he went to America to meet Linda's parents. He stayed there 6 weeks, and he grew a beard and everything to disguise himself. He wanted to go to Broadway. He wanted to walk around the streets. And he was into disguises. He remembered since making Hard Day's Night. So he grew the beard out instead of having a fake beard. He grew a real one. And sunglasses, floppy hat, and he'd walk around the village. And then when he came back, a couple of days before New Year's Eve, when the Beatles went into the studio January 2nd, he had the beard. He didn't shave it. And then when they started Abbey Road 3 months later, he shaved it and then grew it again when the winter came the next year. He was in Scotland. Yeah. Now, I was told, one of the greatest things, it was an honor. I met Jack Douglas, the producer of Double Fantasy. I met Jack Douglas's uh, godson. I can't, it's either his stepson or his godson, but I forgot and I didn't want to ask again. Really nice guy, a little younger than me. And he told me stories about Double Fantasy, Thunder. He told me that John and Yoko put on this act of being this great, loving married couple because they weren't. He goes, she was having an affair on him. He still saw May Pang once in a while. He used to meet May Pang in his dentist office. And, they hardly slept together anymore. She was down in that office 18 hours a day working because she was dealing with Tokyo and England, time differences. So, he'd sleep. He'd throw her out of his room. They didn't even sleep in the same room anymore because they were not this Romeo and Juliet couple that they tried to portray themselves for the press. He said that had ended a long time ago. He said she was in fact, as soon as John died, she had a boyfriend and she moved John's ashes, which were under her bed, to the other room because she was sleeping in the room after a few weeks with her boyfriend. And she actually, it was a weird story. The guy started wearing John Lennon's clothes. It was really, it was very odd. It was very odd. When John was murdered, Julian traveled to New York to be with Yoko and Sean. And he wasn't particularly close to Ono, but he felt New York was the best place for him at that point to be in the aftermath of all this. And Cynthia was a little surprised that Ono demanded that he come there. When Julian arrived in New York, he helped Yoko break the news to Sean. And the following day, Ono showed Sean Lennon's ashes. It was done right away. So the morning after Sean was told, Julian was asked to go to Yoko's room. Would you like to touch it? She said. The urn that was over the fireplace. And Julian was in horror. He was 17 years old. And he said the urn was still warm. She just got the urn back. And he said that the ashes were still warm. It's hard to believe that, but I don't know why they'd lie. Now, in Cynthia Lennon's book, she believed that Yoko had good intentions. But Julian was a kid. She might have thought it's his way to say goodbye and feel connected to his father. But Julian was shocked that the urn had his father's ashes. It had just been 2 days since he had died. And Julian knew there wouldn't be a funeral. Yoko made a statement to that effect that there wouldn't be. It would have been a circus. But he wasn't ready to be presented a warm jar that says, here's your father. And that shock stayed with him a long time. People, you get in these group chats, they don't stop. How do you get out of these chats? So, so Yoko did say to Julian, maybe it would be good if you had a friend here. Would you feel better if you had a friend here to support you? And he asked for Justin, his friend. And, he saw the crowds surrounding the apartment all hours of the night. So Julian was isolated. He had to stay in the house. So she decided to bring the boys out to their Long Island home near Glen Cove. And they stayed there during a silent vigil for John. Now, Cynthia always said she appreciated what Ono did for Julian, although she felt she was insane at times. But when when Ono spoke about his loss, she didn't mention Julian's presence in New York. The statement was published around the world, and there was no mention of Julian being there with Yoko when she told Sean. She said she told Sean. She didn't say, and Julian was with me. There was no mention of him. Interesting. Yoko was a weird woman, but I don't think that she was really all there. To be honest with you, I think she was in Black Magic. She was with Samuel Haverstoy from 81 to 2004. Became her assistant. This guy was with her all the time. He wore John's clothes. And many people believe that she was having an affair with him when she was with John. He was a Hungarian painter. And he's only about 73 now. He's like 20 years younger than her. And there's a lot of pictures of them. He's appearing to wear clothes that are too big for him, John's clothes. But she never really moved on from John. She never really did. Julian said that Sean told him that Yoko would talk about John every day. She cut her hair short after John died because in Japan, you cut your hair when your husband dies. And many people believe that even though she was with that guy, Sam, she never really moved on. Very, very odd. Very odd woman. They collaborated on protests and music. They were separated for 18 months. The Lost Weekend, July 73 to January 75. And he lived with May Pang. But even when they weren't together, they were always talking. So it was kind of like they didn't break up. They were on the phone 5 times a day. All this stuff was still in the apartment. It's not like they had a real separation. She didn't move any of his stuff out of the apartment or anything. She was a strong woman. She felt that John needed to grow up, I guess. But very interesting story. It's like the Romeo and Juliet Yeah, I'm gonna have to turn off those notifications. I don't like to be rude, but there's this one girl that once she said, like, she'll say hello 19 times before 9 o'clock in the morning. Like, say hi, have a good day. How many times do you have to say hello, have a good day? People I deal with. I'm gonna have to. I just gotta get rid of the phone. It was nice when I had a beeper. Thunder will laugh at that. You've seen beepers probably in movies, Thunder. Yeah, because you could say, "Ah, the battery. I turned it off. The battery was weak." You could hide. But yeah, they were not. He was a very flawed person, John. Yes. Um, the thing that I respected about John was when John was wrong, he'd tell you. Like, the Maharishi was the greatest thing until he wasn't. And then John said, "Yeah, I made a mistake." John would own up and move on. That's what John was. Paul rewrites history. That's the problem with John Lennon and Paul McCartney. John was a realist and Paul was a surrealist. Um, Even in the Anthology 4, I did a quickie about the Anthology 4. The Anthology 4 is very sanitized. That's their story, but that's their story without hurting the feelings of anyone in their group. I'm sure if George really could talk, would say Paul was such a fucking pain in the ass. He ruined my experience with the Beatles, and my God, he was a horror. That would be interesting to hear. But we know he felt that way because for years we heard it through the grapevine. But this is their story. Uh, the Beatles broke up. Paul was horrendous in the studio. He was a control freak. He drove them crazy. They were growing up and they didn't want to be sidemen to Paul. Now, Jack Douglas's nephew, godson, was telling me stories. And he said Jack Douglas told him an interesting story. San Francisco writers came down to interview him for Double Fantasy. And the guy came in and he had an I Love Paul button. John Lennon had an I Love Paul button. Yes, Sexy Sadie. Yeah, George talked him out of naming it Sexy Sadie. And John saw the guy was going to start hinting around to try to get juicy gossip. He goes, "Look, I'm going to stop you right here." He goes, "I love Paul." He goes, "I would do anything for him. I'd like to think that he would do anything for me." But that was in the beginning of the sessions. About a month into the sessions, Paul had called John when he heard that John was coming out of retirement. Congratulated him. John said, "Maybe you come down, you say hello, maybe." Yeah. John was really bitchy one night. And he said, unbelievable. They used to order in sushi all the time. During sushi, he said, "McCartney, just when I love him again and we're getting along great, he said he'd come down and he hasn't, blah, 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 blah." And they're real quiet. Lennon sees that they're kind of holding something back. The next day he says, "What's that wrong?" He goes, "Paul calls every day. Yoko won't put him through." He took an old Gretsch guitar and slammed it and screamed at Yoko and said, "I know him longer than I know. Don't you ever do that again." They didn't have that loving relationship that you thought. They didn't. But Jack Douglas told an interesting story. John and Yoko, before Imagine, came over and lived on Bank Street in the Village. That was their first apartment, small apartment in a private home. And he was going to the Hit Factory. Jack Douglas was probably mid-20s, working as like a gopher. Lennon started recording, had to take a break. Goes upstairs. Now, what Douglas was doing at the time was editing film. and doing a little of everything. John goes into the office. Oh, I'm sorry. Can I hang out here for a while? I got to clear my head. And Jack Douglas is like, Shock. Yeah, sure. John lays down on the couch, lights a cigarette up, and he starts talking to Jack Douglas. Took a liking to him. He said, we're stale down there. Come down and see what you could do. He said, well, what do you mean? Just come down, hang out. So now Douglas comes downstairs, walks in with John Lennon. He has like a girlfriend. The producers are looking like, what the hell are you doing here? And he's with me. Oh, okay, John. So he asked Jack Douglas, Douglas lived in the village. So he said, you know the restaurants. Where can we sneak in and out? I don't want a whole big thing. Any restaurants where we can get in and out. And he showed him around. They became good friends. And in '73, the Lost Weekend, he hit Jack Douglas up. Douglas was Zach. No, I think John was a pothead. No, there are accounts that John waked and baked the whole day. She was into heroin, and there were reports that she was still having deliveries of heroin come to the house, 5,000 a week. But now I don't know if they shot it. I don't think they shot it. I think they snorted it. I don't think John was ever shooting. I don't think he was on the needle. I think they snorted it. But no, they were always. Oh yeah, he was a chain smoker. Uh, Gentile, were they? They were French cigarettes he used to smoke. I forget what they were called. I think it started with a G. He used to smoke these very heavy French cigarettes. He used to order them. And he used to order chocolate ollies, which are little chocolate biscuits that you get in England. They're called chocolate ollies, and he used to have them shipped once a month. Yeah, that's what they said. I don't know if it's true. But the nephew did tell me that she was doing heroin in the studio doing Double Fantasy, and he wasn't. And she was drinking a lot. She had a water glass full of vodka, and John started coughing while he was singing, and he went and grabbed it and downed it, thought it was water. And was that what? Yeah, they were French. I know he always smoked those French cigarettes. And the interesting thing is, he spoke to his Aunt Mimi a couple of hours before he died, and said, "I can't wait to come see you." He hadn't been in London in a while, and he was going to go visit the family. And then he died. There's a great interview. Have any of you seen the interview with his Aunt Mimi? What a tremendous interview. Let me know if you'd like me to put it on. It's about 8-10 minutes. I'll put it on if you want me to share it. It's an amazing interview. She was interviewed in '81, a year after his death, or only a bunch of months after his death. Just in case one of you say yes, I will hook it up. I woke up this morning. I felt terrible. You guys always make me feel better. And talking about the Beatles always makes me feel better. I'll put this interview on for you. Very interesting. It'll explain a lot who he was, really.
2 snapshots of a little boy taken from a family album. At this age, there was nothing to distinguish him from any other child. But destiny would later place him among the music greats of this century, for this was Master John Lennon. Millions of words have been spent on the Beatles phenomenon, and in particular on the public image and private life of John Lennon.
Zach.
But there was another side to this complex and often much misunderstood man. Now, for the first time, his aunt...
Zach, that's why he supposedly went back to Yoko when he left May Pang. She had a surefire way for him to stop smoking. And he wanted to. He felt his voice was getting raspy. And she remembers him vomiting a lot. And she always thought that Yoko was into black magic, which a lot of people did. Who knows?
Mimi Smith has opened the door of her home in Dorset to talk of an extraordinary friendship that existed between them and that lasted until his death just a year ago. John Lennon bought this house, which looks over Sandbanks Bay, for his Aunt Mimi 16 years ago. It was his link with reality, and above all with his aunt. Here, away from the prying eyes of his fans, he would escape from the pressures of fame and fortune and talk to the one person, he said, who always understood him, his Auntie Mimi. What she has left, now that John has gone, is a host of memories wrapped in letters, photographs, presents, and phone calls that are, to her, beyond price. They tell a very different story to the one painted in lurid headlines by tabloid newspapers. Mimi looked after John on the separation of his parents when he was just a baby. She remained the mother figure in his life until his death, when he was gunned down outside his New York apartment last December. But despite the anguish of his murder, her memories are happy ones. She remembers, for example, buying him his first guitar.
Well, I'd battled against it, you know, for quite a long time.
Why?
Well, I didn't want him wasting his college time and missing lectures by wasting his time playing a guitar. Whereas his training would last. These things come and go. They're playing a guitar 1 week, everybody's clamoring for them, then they disappear. Nobody ever hears of them again. And then what was I going to do if I had a boy of 21 thrown back on my hands, qualified for nothing?
Can you remember the day when he got his guitar? Can you remember his reaction?
Well, he's a bit like yourself, a soft soaper. And he'd pick me up, you know, and kisses on the cheek. Baby, can I have a guitar? And he hadn't any money to get a guitar. There was only me could buy him one. And I remember we went to Liverpool, and we went into a guitar shop. You know, they were all over the place. I didn't know anything about them, so he chose one, and it was £17.
How surprised were you that the Beatles went on to achieve worldwide fame and success?
I knew they had something, but nothing, nobody expected this. It was a shock to them too.
Now, when John became famous, how often were you able to see him here at Studland?
Oh, he'd nip down weekends, or well, I couldn't say any day, you know. Suddenly there'd be a whirlwind and he'd come in. But it was usually if the pressure was getting a bit much, you know, and he'd come down here and do cartwheels on the beach by himself, nobody else there. Until one time, one of the ferrymen must have noticed who it was. And the next thing, the TV cameras were up here. So I was annoyed. And he said, oh, Mimi, you mustn't be annoyed. He said, really? He'd probably get £5 for ringing up, you know, and saying that I was down here.
Now, when he went to America, he kept in touch with you by telephone. What did you used to talk about?
Sometimes we'd be talking about current affairs and how the pound was going up and down, you know, and that sort of thing. And another time he'd be reminiscing about his childhood. You know, the funny things, because I was always chasing him, you know. I knew what he was up to before. What he could not make out was how I knew when he was up to something.
What about these antics that he got up to? What about the famous love-in with Yoko Ono? Did you talk to him about that?
I certainly did. I just found him, telephoned him, and I said, that's enough. Thank you. We've had enough. Keep that lock for the music hall. And that was the end of it.
So he listened to you then?
Well, although he rebelled and said, I'm not going to do as you tell me, but he always did.
What did you make of his wife, Yoko Ono? Did you ever meet her?
This is funny.
Oh, yes, I met her. I've met her in London, and I've met her once down here. That was in the early days when he brought her. Well, I didn't know what it was all about. I wondered who it was. And I said, who's this? And he pushed his head, it's Yoko. But I didn't think anything of it, you know. But I did say, what do you do for a living? To her. She said, I'm an artist. I said, that's very funny. I've never heard of you.
What did he used to call you?
Mimi. My name is Mary Elizabeth. But I've never been anything else but Mimi. But when he'd been naughty, as I'd say, and I'd ring him up and I said, don't have me to come to New York. And then he'd say, oh, just being grumpy. So as soon as he said that, down goes the phone, you see, and then I'd wait for about half an hour. And to get friendly with me again, he always said, hello, is that you, Gertie? Never mind, Gertie.
Did he give you many presents?
Honestly, the place is full of presents. These, pearls, everything. And I could have had anything in the world. But I'm just one of those people that are rather Spartan, and I don't want anything.
He wanted you to go and live with him in America. Do you regret that you didn't?
No,
or not?
no, I couldn't live in America. And you see, with him phoning for so long, certainly once a week and sometimes twice a week, the phone is so clear. I didn't feel that he'd been away at all. It was as good as seeing him.
What do you make of all these stories that have been published about John Lennon since his death?
Do you mean these scurrilous remarks?
I mean stories concerning his private life, his sex life.
I've never heard anything like it in my life. And if these things crawling out of the woodwork, why don't they come out while he's alive and let him defend himself? Why wait till he's dead? And well-timed and deliberate, every one of them. But I think they're sick-deprived people, obsessed with sex, craving for attention.
When was the last time he phoned you?
Night before he was murdered. 2 hours. And he was saying, I'll be seeing you soon, Mimi. I can't wait to see you. And then, of course, at 5 o'clock the next morning, it came over the overseas news. And honestly, if I thought he was dead, I don't think I could go on. I don't think of him as dead.
Of all the songs that John composed and sang, was there a favorite one that you enjoyed?
Well, I don't know. I think A Hard Day's Night's not so bad at the present time.
Well, there you go. Aunt Mimi. She was supposedly very, very stern. I guess you had to be. But, the Beatles are an enduring, at least for me. It might bore people, and I'm sorry if I do bore you. And if you have any subjects that you want me to cover, definitely suggest one, and I will do it. I think that would be a great idea if there's something you want me to cover. Because I do actually know a couple of things other than Beatles. You wouldn't believe it, but I do. So you guys made me feel great because I came in here not feeling well. Thanks so much, all of you. I hope you had a great, great Thanksgiving and Thanksgiving weekend. And next stop, Christmas. Or I don't know when Kwanzaa is or the exact date of Hanukkah, but I just hope you all have a good one, whatever you celebrate, because that's what we're all here for. not to be miserable. Thank you to Thunder for coming in, who admitted he was trolling me in the beginning. And I think I won him over. And I hope he has a great day with his girlfriend. Boy, those days when you're young with your girlfriend. Stay out of trouble. And I will see you all tonight. I'm doing a show tonight about the Rangers and Mets. A lot of Rangers done, even though it's only about 28 games into the season. And what are the Mets going to do? I'll bring up the Yankees too. I know there's Yankee fans. Joe, I'll see you later. Take care, everybody.